make a move, but the words that I say don't make sense anyway. I just can't get it right. You're so damn fine.
Stupid or something.
Oh, now I'm feeling so dumb. Dumb, 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 dee-da-dee-da-dee. Dumb, 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 dee-da-dee-da-dee. Dumb, dumb, dee-da-dee-da-dee. Oh, now you make me feel dumb. Dumb, 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 dee-da-dee-da-dee. Dumb, 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 dee-da-dee-da-dee. Dumb, dumb, Monday to Sunday, I've been working for it. Trying to catch you ain't no game. Got your attention, now let's take it further. I wanna see you misbehave. All you ever want is shining through. Light me up tonight, it hangs on you. I'm ready for your night call, night call. Couldn't get it if you're brave. No, don't make me wait. I'm vibing on your dial tone. One thing on my brain, so ring me again. No, sir, I do not have a guilty conscience. Let's see what loving you can do. You got my number and I know you want this. So push the button, make a move. All you ever want is shining through. Light me up tonight. It hangs on you. It hangs on you. I'm ready for your night call, night call. Couldn't get it if you're brave. No, don't make me wait. I'm vibing on your dial tone. One thing on my brain, so ring me again. I'm ready for your night call, night call. Couldn't get it if you're brave. No, don't make me wait. I'm vibing on your dial tone. One thing on my brain, so ring me again. Oh baby, just 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 ring me again. And you're shadowed by the darkness of the night. When you wake up in the morning, darling, I'll be by your side. When you get a little lonely and you lose your rhythm, don't give up the fight. When you wake up in the morning, darling, I'll be by your side. I'll be by your side.
So there we go.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you. So we're at the breakout time now. I was going to say, if you have multiple people, we strongly recommend you send people to each of the breakouts because there's great information, and if all of you are in one room, you're not going to be sharing that. So
Okay. As Lloyd said, breakout sessions. In here with Jeff, we've got collaboration to apply Agile technology. in the room over there with Constructing Excellence and Class of Your Own. We've got Developing the Future Leaders of Construction. And over here, we've got Insight into AWP. So, as Lloyd said, make your choices. And we'll get started. Thanks.
All right, am I back on mic? Everyone hear me in the room? Say yes, Jeff, otherwise I don't know whether you can or not. Thank you so much, great. All right, this breakout session, I want to return to some of the things I talked about in the keynote when I talked about AWP opportunities, yeah? So I talked about being outcome focused on a project, and about looking at how we can tackle that last 25% where we get all of the complexity and the issues on our project and we lose our productivity and we start to see safety issues. How do we tackle that? I talked about collaboration, and you probably heard that throughout this couple of days we've been here, that there's a need to collaborate, and I think the environment is moving us in that direction. And I also talked about embracing agile technology and about, as an owner, about how do you be non-passive in that, not wait for the sales guy to come knocking on your door, but actually think about what do you need in order to improve the performance of your project, and how do you reach out and embrace agile technology to make that happen. So in order to create a conversation around this, and I want this to be a conversation, and I'll try and give time at the end for Q&A, is I want to promote a conversation between technology providers and consumers of technology, whether you're owners or whether you're EPCs, to say, how does that relationship work? And in order to meet the net zero challenge, how does that need to change going forward? And on the line, well, I had them a minute ago. Yeah, I've got some representatives from 3 technology providers who have decided amongst them that they would like to collaborate. And the reason why they wanted to collaborate is so that they believe by collaboration they can deliver what owners and EPCs need more effectively. And we'll talk to them about that and how that works. So I've got Asset55 here, I've got Verum, and I have Cumulus. And I'll let them go through what they do and how all that works together. But I want it to be a conversation, so I've also invited a couple of additional people along from the owner's side of the spectrum so that we can create a kind of a dialogue between the two and then hopefully get you to join in that discussion. So let me introduce the participants first of all, and if you're online, if you give a wave so we know which picture they're looking at when I say the name. So from Asset55, I've got Daniel Calhoun, who's the director. Daniel, there's Daniel there. He's actually in Australia right now. Shows kind of the virtual world in which technology people work. Then we've got Connor O'Leary. Connor, give us a wave. There we go. Connor, I think you're in Poland, right, at the moment, Connor?
I'm actually in Spain at the moment.
Oh, you're in Spain.
Yeah.
Oh, well, probably nicer weather, right?
But it's raining. It's raining.
Oh, well, there you go. So I've got Connor from Asset55. And then very, very early in the morning, I believe I've got Scott Beamish there. So what time is it, Scott? About 4 in the morning where you are in Canada?
It's 11 minutes after 4, so not too bad.
Oh, well, then that's okay then. No, my sincere thanks for joining so early in the morning, and I hope you've had the coffee to kind of get your thinking on this. So great. Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. So Scott's the VP of Capital Projects from Verum, and I believe also a co-founder of the company. And then all the way from the US, but actually here present, we've got Matt Kleinman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Cumulus Digital Systems. So welcome, Matt, and I appreciate that you've taken the time to actually fly over here and be with us in person. So that's really good. So those are the technology providers. And then from an owner representative, unfortunately, one of our owner representatives, for various reasons, personal reasons, couldn't make it to this, but we've got 2 people here. One in the room, which I think you've seen most of the time during being here. So Jay, from my old colleague from Shell, who's going to react to the discussion and the debate here. And then we also have Robert Heslop. Where's Robert? Hey, Robert. Pleased to virtually meet you, by the way. Robert and I have not met before this, although Daniel knows him very well. Robert actually works for Equinor, and if I get this right, Robert, you are the leading advisor, planning analysis within Equinor.
Yes, that's right.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today virtually in London. So let me kick this off. So the question I want to put to the technology providers is, why have you chosen to collaborate? And what do you hope to achieve from that collaboration? Why is this coming together now? Maybe I could put that question, first of all, to Daniel from Asset55. Daniel, could you give me your response to that?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I guess as a start point, Asset55 are a technology company. So innovation is at our core. And we focus our innovations on areas where we have a key or core capability from our understanding of the industry. And the biggest challenge we face is turning ideas into innovation and then into technology that we can take to market, deploy, and prove them. And that piece is actually the hardest piece. And you need to prove them, one, to create a customer base, but the 2 most important elements is to gain trust and a track record. When we establish this trust, it means our customers, in much of our cases as operators, open up and they will talk more widely about the challenges they face. But we can also raise areas where we believe our technology solutions can create further value if other areas could be improved. Data quality may be one, connectivity with other systems. So what we want to then do is listen to these challenges and see how we can apply our thinking to solve them. We know that we don't have all the answers. We know innovation from ground up takes time, and major capital projects are time poor. So we need to think in different ways, and collaboration is one way we can significantly reduce the cycle time to improve and deliver outcomes for our customers in a time poor capital project environment. We know our strengths. We recognize the strengths of others, particularly with Verum and Cumulus. And it's then about identifying these collaboration opportunities. And one of the key things here is there needs to be overlap. If there isn't overlap, then the synergies are unlikely to exist. And these overlaps shouldn't be feared. It shouldn't be a case of collaborate or compete. In our case, it certainly is about collaboration. And it's recognizing where this collaboration can not only be mutually beneficial to us as companies, but also where the sum of the individual parts creates more value than the individual piece on its own. And particularly to our customers in this space. And the reason, I guess, for me, the 3 of us have come together, it's our aim to improve data quality that you had already touched on, Jeff, data-driven planning, enable real-time visibility, and apply analytics to unlock execution work fronts and largely the back-end completion process.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. So I'm taking away from that, a lot of the theme we talked about was the need for speed And obviously, we talk about agile technology, they need to be able to deploy at pace, and you feel that the collaboration is enabling you to do that. And also the fact that you recognize your core strengths, and you realize that if the solution demands wider than that, it's faster and more effective to collaborate than it is to kind of generate it internally, is what I took away from that, if I'm hearing that correctly.
Exactly.
Daniel. Thank you so much for that. Maybe I could ask Scott, can you give us Virum's perspective on this? Because as I say, Virum has decided, together with Asset55, together with Cumulus, to collaborate. What's your perspective on collaboration, and why you're collaborating, and what you hope to get out of it?
Yeah, well, thank you. And this is an easy one for us, because that's one of the core the core problems that we're trying to solve whenever we develop Virum, is to create that collaboration platform. What we saw was there was a lot of really good technologies out there that were, they were narrow and deep and really good at specific things, but they were somewhat disjointed, and they were not really connected to the other parts of a project very well. So they offered a really good value on their own, but it was a little bit difficult to really coordinate them with all the other activities that were happening on site. So Virum, as you may know, creates a visualization platform. So when you're dealing with all this data, people are dealing with numbers and tags and such, and they're trying to coordinate in their head. And the first thing they do when they're dealing with something is try and understand, what is it that I'm looking at? What am I talking about? And what does it mean with respect to the other information, the other things that are trying to be done on a project? So we've created this visualization platform where all these other technologies are connected together to, a visible physical 3D object. So for example, you're talking about a pump, P101 or what have you, people in their heads are trying to figure out what are we talking about and what does that mean? What we've done is we've connected all that to an actual a visualization of that pump, and then all these other data sets are visualized together so that you can see one data set against the next. The first thing that does is it makes sure that all the data sets are coordinated properly. It checks the integrity because you're looking at one against the other. And it really allows you to collaborate between the technologies. So we've remained very agile to be able to really connect to all these different technologies, bring them together so that they can work more effectively with each other, and people can intuitively really coordinate that information and be able to act, based on the information much better when you can see it all together in one collaboration platform.
Excellent.
So that's really one of the core things that we've done with our technology.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. So I'm hearing that because I think it was comments that were made earlier that, when we bring technology into a project, it's not in isolation. We have the full suite of technology that's been applied. We have different systems being used by different owners, different EPCs. So it's the ability to collaborate within that and bring that together and ensure that you can deliver the value depending on how you interface with those. So I can see why you make collaboration at the core of what your company is all about. So thank you, Scott. Okay, well, in the room now, we've got Matt here from Cumulus. So Cumulus, can you give me from Cumulus's perspective what you think this collaboration is going to do for you and what you hope to get out of it?
Oh, Mike.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? No? Test it.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. All right, good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you, and thank you for everybody joining in. I don't want to repeat too much of what Daniel and Scott said. They really covered a lot of the points very well. But the point I will focus on from Cumulus's perspective is the beauty of prepackaged solutions. So when it comes to the technology world, the standard, and I think Jeff alluded to this in his keynote, is you have the big guys who are providing what try to be comprehensive software solutions, but they end up being quite shallow in most areas. So they try to be comprehensive, but they don't go deep in any area, or they're generally mediocre in a lot of areas if you're trying to do something. What the advantage of companies like Asset55, Virum, and Cumulus is that we have our areas of expertise where we go very deep and do things very well, but without collaboration, we rely on the customers, the users, the owners, the EPCs to stitch everything together. And that can be very difficult to do. Some are very good at that, others not so much. So what we've come together and said, okay, we're what we believe, in our unbiased opinion, the best in the world at what we do, and there are areas of overlap. What if we collaborate and provide a prepackaged solution to get closer to what the big guys are doing from the customer's perspective, where they don't have to stitch everything together themselves. They don't have to figure out which technology platforms are interoperable. And that's where you get the 1 + 1 = 3, because you can have the best of what Cumulus does, where we're doing IoT in the field to understand the non-physical world, as what Jeff says, and whether work was actually completed as it was supposed to happen, with the data integrity and analytics of Asset55 and the visualization of Virum. And if we've already done the work in the back end to make sure our systems can talk to each other, and we can provide that prepackaged solution to a customer and then respond to customer needs much more quickly than we could acting independently, we think there's a lot of value there, and we're very excited to be able to go out to market with that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. So I think we've heard from the technology providers, it's about 1 + 1 = 3. It's about how do we work quickly, more agilely to meet the customer requirements. And how can we get closer to those needs and provide those solutions that perhaps the big players just aren't able to get to that level of depth while still being connected. So that's a good picture from the technology providers, but let's hear about the people who have to then think about, well, what does this mean for us? So going to the owner organizations, my question to them is, do you see value in this type of collaboration? Does this make sense to you? And what do you see as the issues that we might have of dealing with smaller technology companies? As an owner, what issues might that, or barriers that might come in your way that get in the face of that collaboration? Maybe Jay, if I can ask you to give us your thoughts initially on that.
Yeah, Jeff. So thanks. I feel like I'm back at work 3 years ago when I worked for Jeff. He gives me a sheet of paper.
I don't pay him anymore, so he's going to say what he's going to say.
Yeah, here, can you help me out a minute? So, I didn't even know the content of this discussion, but I will tell you, so it's important for owners. I mean, I think our view on technology is like everybody else. What you have today will be different tomorrow, right? Your iPhone or your Android, you buy the latest, you're going to have another one in a few months, right? The technology will continue to change, so we have to be prepared to accept that. I would say that what we try to do, I think, from an opportunity or project perspective, is consider our P2A. How are we going to execute this thing, do it the best that we can with the likes of AWP and technologies, and deliver it to the operator, to our asset operators, that's flawless, that's easy to do. When they get it and they receive it, that they can do it with something that we delivered during execute, right? So I've built a lot of projects, and when I go back, to debottleneck it right after it starts up, and I'm not there and somebody else is, because we've already atomized, like Jeff said, and gone into the wind on another job, you go back in a year and your P&IDs aren't up to date, your drawings aren't up to date, they didn't use the system that you built the project with, so, why do we do it? I mean, that's not success, right? So I guess my vision would be that we take a project from inception all the way through engineering, procurement, construction, execution, commissioning, and into startup, and then they have a digital twin at the end. And in order to do that, I don't know how that's going to end up, but there are many different options for that right now. These folks like this, and I will say we've got, pilots going on with each of these companies, to be honest with you right now. So, yeah, I mean, I'm all for using them. But I think it's a two-way street. They have to be prepared to meet some of the things that we need, right? Our platforms that we use might need to have their data integrated into ours. So the data doesn't flow one way. And that can be a challenge. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, so what you're saying is the data flow, that integration of what the small agile providers are supplying, how that fits into that wider ecosystem and the ongoing needs of the owner.
Exactly, yeah, because that data that you generate ultimately might be used in another way in an orders portal, right?
Right, right. And do you think, because I get the impression what you're saying is, we do one project, we atomize. Do you think that we are less consistent in carrying technology over from one project to another? Do you think that's something that we need to do more frequently?
Well, I think prior to, the recent job that's finishing now, that is most digital in our company, and it was a mega project. I think that's the way forward, Jeff. But I think prior to 2019 and prior to the digitalization and creation of how we use digital to implement construction, that's fairly new. It's 3 or 4 years old, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, I think we've got to focus heavily on it, and that's kind of what I showed you this morning with that construction and commissioning work group. How do we capture all those things, analyze them, track their return on investment, and then write a global contract to these folks to say, let's do this bigger and better. And that's kind of the way forward, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was talking about before with the repeat, where we said we repeat with organizations, and we repeat with process, and we repeat with people, which is good. But you've also got to keep an eye commercially on that. Are you getting value for money, and are you locking yourself into something? And I understand that, that's something that owner organizations wrestle with all the time.
All the time.
That. Yeah. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah.
Appreciate that input. So if I could now put the same question to Robert. So Robert, from Equinor's standpoint, or from your personal standpoint at least, what do you view as the value of this type of collaboration? What have you seen? And where do you see the difficulties in engaging with these types of companies and encouraging them to work agilely with you as an organization? If you give me your viewpoint, Robert.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm sorry for my voice. I lost my voice this morning, so I hope it lasts through this discussion. But yes, it does have value, and we have piloted some of these technologies, and we see that this has value. And it's almost everybody sees the value, but it's still difficult to integrate it. I think that's the key word. But first, I think we need to take a broader view and look at digitalization and looking at IT departments being in charge of digitalization. I think that's the first thing we need to overcome, because it's the process that needs to be in charge of digitalization and not the IT department. That's one thing that we have internally. So digitalization is about process, not about applications, basically, or data. It's about the process and the data supporting that process. So that's one thing. Another thing is that digitalization is not a corporate initiative. It seems to be like that today, that it's a corporate initiative. So every corporation is doing their own digitalization initiatives. We're spending millions of billions of dollars on this digitalization, and we haven't come too far, because we want to build this ourselves inside our own house. So first, we need to realize that this is not a corporate initiative. It's actually an industrial initiative, that we need to collaborate across companies, across owners, contractors, vendors. We all need to speak the language. We need to have a common data platform, because the main problem now is the cost. The cost is too high to integrate new tech into our infrastructure. The cost is too high because we need to configure everything every time we do this. So we need standardization of objects, of how we exchange data between contractors and owners. That is the first point to bring the cost down. Right. Second thing is that we need to create information models based on international standards, and the example here is the iPhone, or the Android phone. That's an information system, and basically, if I want a technology, I can go to the App Store and I can download it into my information system. So we need to try to think like that. We need a standardized information system that is capable of integrating external technologies, but they also need to be based on that standard so they can integrate easily into that standard. This is not an easy task, of course, but I think that's the direction we need to go. And the third thing is we need an industrial collaboration. We need industrial services of exchange of data, because, I mean, if we need to have bilateral agreements between contractors, I mean, we're just killing the IT departments in the different companies, because they are so overloaded of the different ways. I mean, from Equinor to our contractors, we're probably asking for the same information in 8 different ways to our contractors. We're not standardized of how we are asking for this data. What is the metadata? What is the data exchange agreement between contractors and owners? So there's a lot of things that we need to do to bring the cost down. That's the main thing, I think, bringing the cost down to integrate. I mean, because we see you have to do a lot of manual labor, because it's not standardized, it's not linked. We have to do it differently. The engineering numbering system is different every time, and everything is different. So to be able to really accelerate this, we need to focus on industrial standardization and industrial services and common data environments.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Great points that you're making there. And it kind of makes me think somewhat of what Jamie was talking about, where in the UK government has become quite active in driving expectations in construction and driving standards in construction, which then certainly in the public sector, there's a push to align around those. Of course, the private sector is on the outside looking in. I guess the other parts we need to look at is, where are the institutions in all of this? You know, we've got institutions represented here today. There are oil and gas institutions as well as manufacturing, etc. And what role do the institutes play in bringing these things together? And the question is, who starts the ball rolling? Is it the owners that reach out? Is it the technology providers that offer to broach the conversation, as we're kind of doing today a little bit? We've got, you know, Shell and Equinor in the room at least, and plenty of other representatives here. How does that conversation start so that we can realize that by that collaboration, we all gain? And I think that's the conversation we need to continue. So thank you so much for your insights and questions on that, Robert. Okay, let me take this forward a bit now. In my keynote speech, I talked about game-changing technologies as I saw it. And the 3 companies we've got here today, I believe, embody in their collaboration the ability to address many of the points that I brought up. So I want us to dig a little bit deeper now in what that means, and then get the reaction to that from the owners as to whether they can see the vision that these collaborating technology companies are trying to create here. So maybe if I can start with Connor, out there in sunny Spain, or raining Spain, wherever it is at the moment, because I know Connor has a lot of passion, and I always enjoy his discussion here. Connor, can you tell us about, you know, I talked about data integrity being a foundation before we move things forward, and I talked about the need to get to data-driven planning, where the reliance on the experience of one individual really wasn't where we're at now in terms of being able to bring almost a scientific approach to the planning process. Connor, can you give me your views on that and where you are with Asset55 in that journey?
Yes, good day all. I guess you covered this topic off quite well, Jeff, in your keynote, along with other speakers today. But there are a number of questions we can ask ourselves within this topic. And I guess it's to understand, how do we secure this integrity and ultimately the foundations needed for data-driven planning. And I guess we need to start with, what is data integrity? It refers to reliability and trustworthiness of data throughout its life cycle, not a moment in time. So for data to be the foundation of any good decision or science, there could be no questions around its integrity. And there lies the challenge for us, as you said, Jeff, in your keynote. We're in this together. So that is our challenge. And I guess to give a context example, making an important decision based on data that would be entirely or even partially inaccurate, that's not something we would do in our personal life. But we tend to do this in projects quite often. and we make decisions that are based on weak data, and it leads to a not very positive outcome. But with the right technologies, we can make a difference and significantly improve project outcomes. And we can do this through improving data integrity in the first step. And I fully agree with what Robert referred to also about data standardization. But there needs to be a transition between when we get to that standard phase, which I believe is more of a long-term play, and the short to medium term, where we secure integrity in our data within owner organizations, firstly. And I guess how do we secure that? Until we have standards on an industrial scale, we need to use technology. We have technology available today, and it can automate this labor-intensive process by validating the inputs for compliance, consistency, completeness, backing up our data, and controlling and maintaining it. Data is one of the most valuable commodities you will have in a project. Because when it comes to data-driven planning, data integrity empowers decision makers on a project. As a project leader myself, as Jeff mentioned, I battled with poor data integrity, and the artistic approach to planning is something that I really struggled with. But today, we are able to collect so much data, so therefore the responsible thing is to harness that data and nourish it. And that way our project leaders can confidently make decisions and steer projects in the right direction. And going back to your keynote, Jeff, just to highlight, I mean, poor project performances globally is a major call for action for industry leaders and technology providers. And we must collaborate together and to secure that project performance where we get speed, predictability into our projects. And when we get speed and predictability, we will reduce our carbon footprint through efficient execution. That is guaranteed. Yeah, that's it from me, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Connor.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we talked about the data integrity as the foundation, needing that before going forward, and then starting to harness the technology to start to get our planning processes, our risk processes into a better place. And clearly, you know, you've suffered the frustrations of that not happening on projects, and I know you're passionate about those topics now. So thank you, Connor. Let's move this on then. So if we get that upfront process, if the data integrity is right, if the planning process is done on a more systematic basis, and once we get into construction, we all know that things happen in construction, vagaries happen. So therefore, it's about where are we at any one point in time. And that starts from, you know, physically where we are. So at that point, I want to bring Scott in. Can you tell us more about what you do in Verum in order to, so we know where we are in time and what kind of advantages that brings to construction?
Yeah, certainly, and I can't help but mention after what Connor said there is data integrity is so key. What we do is we bring data visibility and accessibility. So some of our clients have a love-hate relationship with us because we expose poor data integrity very quickly by bringing it all together, visualizing against, against the realities of a site. So making it accessible is so key. So what we do is data capture technology has improved so much over the past few years. You know, the iPhone 12 now has a laser scanner on it. You can digitize a construction site very rapidly using handheld mobile devices. So what we did is we decided, well, if we can digitize a construction site daily or weekly or monthly, we will have a digital representation of what our construction site looks like right now. If we have that, and then we have a digital representation of what we want, which is our CAD models, our design files. We have two digital sets, what we want and what we have. When we digitally match those together, we can identify what's different. So the computer algorithms can quickly tell us what's different between our plan and our reality, which is what a project team really does. So that gives the physical respect. So our algorithms go through and tell us three things within 24 hours of a data capture. Are things built correctly? So dimensionally, you can tell if something's been built incorrectly and what needs to be done to fix it. And second, is it installed? Is it there? And then without really much manual labor, the software goes through and it updates installation status and quality of everything that's there, and then spits out a progress report. And it doesn't only tell you what, your percent complete and such. What it also does is that if you are behind or ahead of schedule, instead of just telling you you're so many percent behind or ahead, it shows you what you are ahead. This pump should have been installed, but it hasn't, right? So you can actually see it. And then thirdly, what we do is we attach all that, like we said previously, all the other progress data to those components so you can visualize it. So like, for example, with Cumulus, they track all their flange status. That's great. What we do is we bring that to the visual world and say, show me all my flange status. And then just for colors, you'll be able to see every flange on your plant, and by a color, you can see its status and where it's at. So it really helps to really visualize in that 3D context all that information and that progressing, so you can get a much better understanding of it and manage progress going forward.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Yeah, when I see that technology of knowing where you are in the project, I'm extremely jealous. I've done many projects over the years where the latest information I had was the project services report, which was based on data that was at least 12 weeks old. And then I had to make decisions going forward. So the fact that this can come at you, and in such a way, and I think many people have talked about this week, it's, reports, P6 files, all those kind of things, they're not exactly friendly to the people that are doing the work. If you can visualize it, if they can see it, then it's so much more effective. And I think that's what Virum brings. And the other one you didn't mention, actually, Scott, which really blew me away when I saw what you were doing in Virum, was the dimensional check down to millimeters, just using photogrammetry. And the one that came out of that, and I've done a lot of brownfield work in my life, so I was, again, very jealous of this, where you can actually see what's been installed and then overlay on the top of that from the 3D model what's coming next. And is this dimensionally correct? I mean, Jamie was talking about laser cutting. We're not quite up to laser cutting in oil and gas. We'll try and get there, Jamie, but we certainly need dimensional accuracy. Am I going to bother to bring a big pipe spool out and try and install it, only to find out that none of the pipe supports have been put into tolerance? Or do I fix the pipe supports first and go in? So I think there's lots of advantages there. Pre-fit up in the digital world, especially in brownfield projects, again, extremely jealous. And I think that's amazing stuff that you bring in there. But also, I think the other thing to take away from this is, I know when you guys talked as 3 different companies, not only did you have your specialism, Scott, but also we saw that your visualization was leading. And therefore, the 2 other organizations recognized, hey, by collaborating with you, then we can tap into your clear lead in the visualization. So it's multiple aspects that come together in the collaboration. So I think that's fantastic. Okay, Matt, can we talk about the non-physical of my famous last 25%? How do I get into those non-physical aspects? Please take it away.
Sure, and can you guys hear? Yeah, there we go. And Scott did a great job with the handoff there, so thank you, Scott. So there's a dark humor in our industry that says we did it right because we did it twice. And that's the problem we're aiming to solve, to make sure that with IoT and data analytics that we can make sure work is done right the first time and not the second or third time that it's done. So we equip workers in the field with commercially available tools and sensors that have connectivity. More and more are coming into the market from a variety of OEMs every year. And then our software communicates with those tools and sensors in real time to give our customers, who are the owners and EPCs and contractors, a real-time view into who did the work, how well they did it, and how long it took them to do it. So that when you're using a system like Virum and you're saying, okay, here's a piece of piping, and we can see the piping is there, and that's great. But then the question is, was it installed properly? Was the flange, to use Scott's example, properly tightened? And that's where we come in, and we say yes or no. That flange either was or was not installed, and then if there is a problem with it, we alert the right people in real time, so they don't have to wait days or weeks or months to discover there was a problem with the installation of that flange. They could see in real time and have a record of what happened to that flange installation. And so that affects that non-physical world when you're at that last 25% and typically running around with all kinds of paper records, people chasing down signatures, whatever else they have to do. Instead of that whole mess, they just use our system and it's available either in our dashboard or we make it easy to integrate using other systems to see, yes, that work was done, here's the record, here's the evidence that it was done, maybe there's photographs and checklists in addition to the tool data, and then we make that all available. If there's bottlenecks, you could easily see, hey, it's this group of workers that's actually going slower than this other group of workers. So what's going on there? Is it that they don't have the right training? Is there something wrong with what's going on in that part of the plant? And we provide that level of in-depth visibility using the IoT data.
Thank you, Matt. And I think it's true to say, because I've known Matt for some time now, and we've gone from the IoT of flange management, this is where it all started for you guys, and now you're expanding out into those other areas I touched on in my discussion, and this needs to go further, because using the Internet of Things to provide that real data as opposed to pieces of paper is where you're at, and the workflow that goes with that. So thank you for that insight. So between Virum and Cumulus, hopefully we know where we are on a project and we get that kind of data and we can deal with it and avoid the paperwork, etc. But that data flow then gives us an opportunity to get forward. So I'll take this back to Asset55. And Daniel, can you tell us more about what you can do from an analytics perspective with that real-time data that we have confidence in coming in from the field?
Yeah, sure. So one of the points you made at the beginning of this is that major capital projects are highly dynamic. So we need to recognize that fact. And the way we look at analytics is really how we use data to drive execution forward. Excuse me. And what's really critical is coming back to that integrity of data, the engineering side, the tag data that Connor touched on. And then as we get into execute, it's what is the real status of the field. And that's where the power of what Virum and Cumulus comes into. Absolutely central to success. But what we're aiming to do is use the relationships in data and real-time status to unlock what we call opportunities and constraints. The ability to do something, it is available, or what is the final thing stopping us from unlocking a work front that may be important. And from all my talks, and we do a lot of work with major operators, all construction managers and project managers tell me the same thing. They know where they should be because the plan is easy to understand. They have a reasonable idea of where they are. What they don't know is what work fronts are available to me right now. And that's to steer and guide, where to put the workforce to be most productive. And basically, data analytics allows this whole process to be automated. It can be visualized and shared through integrated dashboards. It can be presented back through visualization, as Scott was saying, within the 3D model. And this process may be very similar to the constraint management process you typically see with AWP. But as we move into the completions phase, an area that I'm hugely passionate about, it's been a big frustration over my whole career, is how do you unlock completions-based opportunities significantly earlier than we currently do on projects? And this for me is the piece where AWP can be further improved. And in order to do this, it's about understanding the relationships between activities, both what constitutes within a subsystem and the things that I call kind of bow wave activities that cross subsystem relationships. And a few examples might be installation of spools. There are 10 spools in a test pack. The 10th spool says, let's go walk it down. And we've proven on projects that we can start hydro testing as early as 10% piping complete. It's then the relationships of those test packs to a heat trace circuit. And so far, because heat trace circuits get developed late, or test packs do, you tend to find a heat trace circuit crosses test packs, which means you can't unlock that scope until 2 test packs or 3 test packs are tested and reinstated. It's the relationship between a test pack and a leak pack. Again, often we see the boundaries overlapping. So it's in this that we start to build predictive analytics to understand when we can unlock work scopes from data-driven planning, but also the real-time availability in the field. It works the same in terms of E&I. It's the relationship of cables running in cable trays. So we can understand what cable trays are installed to automatically tell us what cables we can pull, and group those cables into logical, where they all share a common tray system, where you're going to significantly improve cable pull productivity. And we've proven on projects that this could be up to 300% and blow records out of the park on projects, particularly in fabrication environments. The same piece is then the equipment, the E&I equipment that's installed. What cables are pulled through it? What terminations can be complete? Can we open that junction box, go and terminate everything? Shut the box and preserve it? What loops can we unlock ahead of MC? And all of this is possible through completions enablement. And to touch on what you said, Jeff, the last 25% typically takes up to 50% of the time is where there's a massive prize. And we've proven on a number of projects with Equinor, with Shell, with ExxonMobil, that the last 25% can be completed in 25% or less of the duration. But what's absolutely critical is establishing a data foundation, having trusted information that we can use from the field to then run this analytical process. And largely what this is going to do is create predictability. It will require significantly less people to identify these kind of opportunities and constraints, which then frees up time to go and action these opportunities in the field. So we can not only construct, we can complete, we can commission and start up on time.
Thank you, Daniel. And you know, for me, this gets to the heart of what I was trying to talk about, of having an outcome focus. You know, often we talk about technology. Well, that's cool technology, that looks really good, and that can give me a spot solution here, that can give me a spot solution here. But the question is, how does it come together, and to what purpose? So if we start off with the premise of saying, we have a problem that the last 25% of our project's taking 50% of the time, and that's not allowing me to get the outcome, how do I need to fix that? Well, I'd like to be able to do analytics that would unlock the work so I can do that. Well, how do I do that? Well, I need the data from the field. I need it from the physical world and the non-physical world. And if I get that, then have I done the base planning up front to get us in a position where we can effectively manage that? And then have I got the data integrity so that I can trust the analysis so I can act upon it in the field? So it's kind of thinking backwards through your project, from the outcome to what needs to happen. And then the interesting thing is looking at each of these companies, they're agile, they're innovative, etc., but I guess the penny's dropped that they don't hold the answer to everything. And therefore, if they want to move quickly and agilely, collaboration needs to be the norm for them. And I think then with what was brought out by Robert earlier about, well, yeah, okay, that's fine, but how do we get that to be more standardized across industry? How do we get governments involved? How do we get institutes so that we can drive that cost down of doing that and get not set up differently every time we do it? So great conversation. If I turn back to the owner representatives again, I'd like to hear your views on whether the technology providers, what we've talked about, to you as owners, do you think that's going to make a significant contribution when you hear that story to enable and have significant impact on the outcome through AWP? And I'd also like to hear from you, what do you think we need to look at next? We've talked about something that we're all passionate about, but you as owners having to live with this, where do you see the next challenge that you'd love to see technology tackle for you on your projects? And maybe I could start off this time with Robert on that. Can you give me your views? Robert, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that.
If I had a Corona
Yes.
for every time that happened.
Yes. Basically, what we see is the amount of waste in our industry is unsustainable. I think that goes for all of us. I've seen reports that energy industry is one of the lowest rated on digitalization. We have look around us, we see other industries that are totally integrated. And they're doing it with technology, industrial technology and standardized technology. But technology providers with embedded processes, I think, will be the key to accelerate the production efficiency. So that meaning that we're trying to do this ourselves, and the technology providers are showing us all the fantastic things that they can do. And it's a gap between what we internally in our IT departments and our processes are trying to do ourselves and being pushed by the industry out there. Okay, what I'm saying to internal, okay, we can buy this right now. It's available. It's been proven. It's there. We can integrate this app into our information system right now. But still, it's a kind of a, no, we want to do this ourselves. We want to build this technology ourselves. So we're still on the corporate side. So we need to break that down in the industry. And I think the technology projects, they need to help us to do that, to push us in the right direction, to see, okay, we can do this now. You don't have to wait 5 to 10 years to be able to do this. It's here, it's ready. Technology is here now. That's one thing that the tech providers can push us in that direction. And I think the amount of time we have spent on digitalization internally is way too long, and I think we need to start collaborating, and the tech providers need to push us in the right direction, show what they can do. They need to be out there showing us what is available to us, So that's one thing. Push us in the right direction, and of course you are doing that. But also, I think that the integration part of these technologies is one of the key things, that these technologies that we're talking about, they need to be integrated inside on our premises as an application, we cannot sharing information is really difficult, across borders, we have rules and regulations for sharing this type of information and this type of information. So I think we need to move into as kind of the iPhone, the application again. You need to be able to install inside our premises to be able to integrate this with our existing processes. So I think that's the way forward. And when we see what we need to, some of these tech providers, they have an advantage, of course, in non-standardized processes and data. But I think also the tech providers need to push the industry, because we're all working together. We need to push ourselves toward that goal of trying to be more standardized, because it's easier to take a lower cost inside our information model, So I think it's a common ground that we try to push ourselves towards standardization of these processes and this data that is a lot of waste, just of schedules between subcontractors and contractors and owners. There's billions of activities that are manually input, transferred manually. It's low quality. It's transferred between Primavera and Safran and Microsoft project. It's a big mess of how we are actually transferring all this data. So there's so many things that we need to work together on to get where we want.
I think, Robert, it's what we might call a target-rich environment, right, in terms of the opportunity. And hopefully, we're clearly not going to resolve it today, but I think hopefully what we're illustrating is the need for these kind of conversations. This is not about technology companies selling you products. It's not about owners demanding. It's about a conversation of how do we come together. And clearly, institutions play a part. We talk about CII, ECI are represented here, and they can play their part in trying to help us bring that together. I know there's talk of creating think tanks around this. How do we continue this conversation? So thank you for your valuable insights, Robert. Jay, can you maybe give me your response before I turn some questions open to the audience?
Yeah, first of all, to the question you asked around whether this could significantly impact productivity and waste and AWP, I think that's a given. There's no question that new technologies like this that give us, again, I'll use the term I did yesterday, an eyes-on and yet maybe a hands-off approach, but gives us visibility into whether the things are going the way they should be. Being able to have a discussion with an EPC or a constructor, either way, around real activities that are happening in the moment is different than Jeff said about getting a 6-week-old P6 schedule where it's 1,000 lines long and you may or may not find out where the problem is.
Yeah.
It's a game changer. Now, that being said, we started doing that 4D work, the 3D modeling puts the schedule in it, in 2012. So why haven't we been, doing this for 10 years? And now that technology's coming along, I think Robert is exactly right. You have to push us. We are a big wheel to push, to turn, and our IT groups, and he hit that on the head too. I have to go without saying this. IT and the business, I'll call the business, us project people, the business, okay, people delivering something, are getting much more aligned. But I have seen disasters and train wrecks run where technologies get rolled out via IT and put in an app or whatever it might be, and the end users aren't trained to do it, are trained to and that's the worst thing you can do, because if it's your technology that gets rolled out and nobody knows how to use it, then your technology just failed. And that may not be the case, but that has been the case. So we have to make sure that you keep us honest, that you understand how we work, and that we do have our partners in IT that we need to deal with. We do need, in this cloud-based society that we have, do the proper risk management techniques that are associated with the information and make sure it's secure. That's all standard business. You've probably been through it with multiple owners. So in terms of these 3 applications, I think they all have a great place in our project execution. Where I would say the opportunity lies, Jeff, is like you said, and I'm challenging not only the people in here, but I think it's CII as well. They're execution focused, but we all do projects in order to operate and make money. If we can't operate, we can't make money. So at the end of the day, the gap exists in the commissioning. The 364 research team that put out, I think, 2 years ago, what's been done with that? I haven't heard anything in the industry that, other than it was a great document, a great research, but how are we applying it? Who's doing, we're not doing it yet. We're trying. But that's where the money is. That's where the opportunity lies.
Yeah.
And if we can hand that over to an operator with our execution elements included in it, with the attributes, we owe it to you all as providers, data quality. We got to start with that. If you don't have good data quality, you're not going to succeed anyway. So we need to have our 3D requirements right. We need to give you that model in a correct way with the proper attributes, so that when you can use that data across all of these technologies, we can do something with it that makes a positive impact.
Thank you so much, Jay. Yeah, it's a good point, and I echo your frustration, shall I put it that way, of it's this last 25%. It's the commissioning. It's, we get right the way through the S-curve. We're all looking good. Everyone's standing back, getting the photographs taken, and then we'll lose it in that last piece, and we need to bring the focus there. So that's my experience. I'm guessing unless John savages me with his time scale, do we have time for just a few questions from the audience? Yeah. So is any? Yeah, no problem, John. We'll just take a couple of questions. Any questions that you would like to ask? And I guess John will pass the mic around to whoever wants to make a question. Sure, Alan. Can we get Alan the microphone?
So Alan Dolney from Worley. So my question is to the technology providers, and it's, when I think schedule, I think critical path. And from an EPC perspective, vendor data is one of the things we talk about on every single project. And so I'm wondering, have you actually tried to tackle the issue of vendor data, and to actually not drive back into the construction phase, but how do we get the supply community into this discussion, and how successful have you been?
I guess maybe Daniel, would that be your question to take?
Yeah, vendor data is always terrible. I guess part of this comes back to what Robert mentioned. It's about standardization, setting the requirements for vendors, what data, at what point. I know Exxon have done a lot of work in terms of looking at vendor data and the timescales. So you don't need all data associated with a packaged piece of equipment by the 30% model review, but there are critical elements that you do. Then perhaps by the 60% into execute if you need it for operations. So it's about creating the templates and standardization and setting those requirements in a contract. From our perspective, we can validate all of that data, tell you where the gaps are, all the inconsistencies, but the setting of that happens at a contractual level. And I think, you know, it's standardization, as Robert said, and being prescriptive in contracts that will improve that vendor data process.
I think it's also worth, you know, we talked the other day with O3 on this, who are looking at the workflow of AWP and saying, you know, do we actually make the connections and the links between why do I need that data at that point in time and set that expectations with the vendors, and is it visible when they don't deliver on that, and how does it follow up, or does it get buried in the Excel spreadsheet data issues that we have on our project? So I think there's a visibility on the workflow and the process which would help in that sphere.
Yeah, I would also add to what Daniel said, a lot of it comes down to when providers like us are brought into the project, and it's usually too late. If we could be brought in earlier so that we could affect the contracts before they're let, to say to the vendors, hey, you're going to deliver a skid of a pump or whatever it might be, this is the data we expect about that skid, that would save a huge amount of time when it comes to the commissioning phase. And often that doesn't happen, and we're trying to work backwards to get this data in, which is never optimal. So it's really about bringing technology early so that we can affect the contracts before they're let and say, like Daniel said, this is the data we expect you to be able to provide in this format.
I think that speaks back to what we said about collaboration, about the changing economic environment in which we'll operate, which will allow us to bring technology providers together with contractors, together with the owners in the early phases, and to set expectations within the supply chain, and then work with the supply chain, because they have their own issues. They're going to be under severe stress with all of this, so we need to work with them, not against them, right?
Okay, shall we break for lunch?
Yeah.
And continue the discussion during lunch?
I can do. I guess just as a takeaway from this, what I would say is hopefully what we've done today is not try to sell you things. What we tried to do is to start a conversation, and what I think is a very necessary conversation. I'm hoping that we can go beyond this particular conference, and we can create the platforms and the fora where we can continue the conversation for the good of our industry and for the good of achieving the goal of net zero. But I would like to thank Scott in particular, because he got up so early, and my friend Matt for flying across. If I can, my colleagues in Asset55, Daniel and Connor, and very much to Robert for giving us his opinion all the way from Norway, and for Jay in the room there. So a round of applause for the participants. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thanks very much. Great. We'll reconvene at 1 o'clock.
Goodbye.